Welcome to Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that can change everything. This is a place for you to bring those difficult conversations that you've been mulling over, that you've been thinking about while you've been walking around, doing the washing up or commuting to work. I'm Eve Stanway. I am a philosopher, psychotherapist of 25 years, divorce and breakup coach, and I help people in the moments where there's a difficult conversation they just don't know how to handle. This is a moment, your moment, to pause, reflect, and have a bit of breathing space to think about what matters to you and how to tackle those difficult moments. Using insight, reflection, case studies, and examples, I will guide you through those difficult conversations in a safe and constructive way. So let's begin. Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Difficult Conversations. Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that change everything. Hello and welcome to Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that change everything, episode 22, the first 90 seconds. Why most conversations are won or lost in the first 20 seconds, especially around separation and divorce. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens before a conversation, during, and then what can happen afterwards that can lead to really catastrophic difficulties within the conversation. Human beings are social animals. What that means is we need other people in order to survive. It's true that if life is really difficult, you may feel that you're better off by yourself and that you can't rely on other people. But actually, human evolution and human survival is based around our ability to interact successfully with other people. Relationships matter. And one of the reasons for this is because when we're very young, for many years of our lives, we rely on others as caregivers. So our ability to understand other people, to predict their behaviour, predict their movements, to interact with them, and to cope with them when they're being quite difficult or when the situation is difficult is really, really important. And it's something that children learn from a very, very young age. They are able to pick up, using body language, listening to tones of voices, what the people around them are thinking and feeling. Even in the womb, they can hear that. They're beginning to pick up cues of stress, worry, anger. And there's been studies where children have been measured, their physiological responses have been measured. And the results are that children, even from a very young age, are very, very sensitive and aware of their environment. And that really does make sense from a survival point of view. So in a relationship, if a relationship is being established, whether that relationship is a good or bad one, the people in that relationship will have become very, very used to each other's actions and responses. There's a high level of guesswork, mind reading, prediction, theorizing, trying to understand the other person. And if we're in a situation where the other person is threatening to us, or perhaps our behaviour is triggering or threatening to the other person, there's a whole load of stuff happening underneath the surface that we might not be fully aware of. We might not know. We might pick things up, but not be aware where we're getting those from. And sometimes people call it their instinct, or call it gut feeling, or whatever you want to call it. But what it is our human body, our well-tuned antennae inside of us, interpreting the people around us and what's going on around us in order to assess for friendliness, for threat level, for support, whether or not we're safe or whether or not we're unsafe. There's an awful lot of dangers that can happen to a human as they're growing up through childhood, and certainly our evolutionary ancestors had to learn how to deal with an awful lot of absolutely dangerous situations. There were dangers to do with not having enough to eat or drink or not having enough shelter, but undoubtedly an awfully large amount of the danger was actually from other human beings and from our ability to socially integrate with those other human beings. Often we're just not thinking about it that way. Often we're thinking about what we think, our history is with someone, but we may not be noticing what's happening within our body. One of the things that does happen is we learn, all of us do, every single person, we learn to co-regulate ourselves. That means that we learn how to regulate our own emotional feelings and thoughts and needs with the people around us. Now, this can lead to some real problems. So one of the things that can happen is if we're in a really, really distressed state or we're feeling really uncertain, then what we can do is seek reassurance, seek help, seek support, seek safety from the people around us. I'm feeling really worried. Can you help me out? Can you help me feel more safe? The equivalence would be if you were a child feeling really scared or worried and wanting a hug, and that being a good thing. But there's other ways that we regulate. So another way that humans have for regulating ourselves is through a process of externalizing what we're thinking and feeling. And that's really good for stories in the film industry and stuff like that, because what can happen is that we can watch something and we can go through a process which I think the ancient Greeks called catharsis, where we identify very, very strongly with the hero's journey, and we can almost feel that we're on that journey with them. You know, if you've watched Lord of the Rings and you saw Frodo deciding he wasn't going to throw the ring into Mount Doom, there'll be a lot of people going, oh no. I even remember when I read the book going, no, he's gone all that journey and he's not going to throw the ring in. And that's because at that stage we're really going through it with the character, we're really experiencing it. One way of dealing with that, if we're in a difficult relationship or we haven't learned how to do this properly, is we can make the other person upset, and then we can see them being upset, and that makes us feel better. And that's one of the contortions of human psychology, which is a little tricky to understand, but really important to know is a thing that really does happen. So if we've been in a relationship with someone and we've got established relationship patterns, perhaps we've got very good at predicting, so we can tell when they're feeling upset or when they're feeling worried or when they can't find something even. And I know I could do that with my dad. You know, I could tell that he was looking for something even before he was saying anything about looking. And because I was very used to co-regulating his feelings, because that's one of my roles growing up, I would know that he was looking for, say, his glasses, and I would be able to locate them and give them to him rather than him getting upset because he couldn't find them. It honed my interpretation, my predictive skills, and my ability to notice what was going on without even really being aware of what I was doing. And that was really good. It's a brilliant skill as a coach. It can be problematic. For example, if I predict something thinking it's going to happen and it doesn't happen, or it's not the way I thought, or I've jumped into interpretation without actually double checking that's really what's going on, that could be a problem. Another way it can be a problem is I might be, and I certainly have been in my life, and I know a lot of the clients that I work with have been, there's an ability to, because we can be attuned to the other person, and because we can predict what they're thinking or want or need, or at least we feel that we can get into a situation where we become so good at doing that perhaps we get taken advantage of. And somebody knows, this is a person who will predict my needs before I even state them. That's a wonderful way of actually controlling somebody, because you can use displays of disappointment or upset or anger to get what you want. But anyway, let me get back to the topic of this episode, which is the first 90 seconds in any conversation. So in the first 90 seconds of any conversation, even before it's happened actually, when we're considering having that conversation, I would like to talk about the fact that I would like a divorce. I would like to talk about the fact that I'm really unhappy with how untidy it is when I get home. I would like to talk about wanting more help around the home, or more space to study, or fewer distractions when I'm trying to do something. Or I would like more help. Or I would like to sleep because I'm tired. Or I would like a chance to explain myself because I don't feel I've had the opportunity to do that. These could be all conversations that we want to have. And the likelihood is, if you're listening to this, maybe you've wanted to have those conversations. If it is a tricky dynamic, if you've got used to regulating your emotions with the other person, or they regulate theirs with yours, a couple of things can happen here. In a relationship, that might be taking place. When the relationship is fracturing or breaking down, when there's been a breakdown of trust, or perhaps the relationship has ended, the right to co-regulate, the ability to co-regulate with that person becomes very, very disrupted. And that underneath emotional work can make the words not land correctly. And that can be a really, really significant problem. And it can cause conflict because the words that we're trying to say aren't hitting with the other person. Some of you who are listening to this may have heard of attachment theories. There's various different types of attachment. You can certainly read about them. There's an awful lot of nonsense written about attachment. The reality is most people have some kind of attachment issues at some point, somewhere in their lives. And it isn't usually only one thing. It's often quite a few different things. And attachment problems usually happen because there was parenting in childhood that didn't feel safe for the child one way or another. And it may not be because the parent was abusive. It may have been unsafe for a number of reasons. For instance, the parent could have been under pressure. They could have been unwell. They could have had another child that was particularly unwell. Could be all sorts of different reasons. So what happens is when you want to have a conversation, your nervous system, your emotional regulation system inside of you may start on its own adventures of trying to think, oh, well, there's no point in doing this. Or the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that kind of deals with emergencies, might burst into action and start predicting all of the problems, or why it won't work, or why there's no point, or maybe why you're not justified in even asking. All of these things can take place. And then what happens is the conversation is lost. You're already talking yourself out of it. It's certainly something I see a lot when I'm talking to men about difficult conversations. The concern that they have that they will either become overly emotional in the conversation and it'll escalate and they'll make things worse, or that they will shut down, they will freeze, and they will not be able to go any further, or perhaps that they will have to shut down because they, again, fear of making it worse. It means that before they've even opened their mouths, they're already preparing for it not to have worked, or for it to go wrong, or there not to be any point in talking. And this is a funny thing about humans. We can be in really difficult, damaging, hard, uncomfortable, really outright dangerous sometimes relationships with each other. And really the only way to get through is through having a conversation and talking about what we want and how we feel. But because we don't have the structures and the skills to do it, the danger is that we'll just get it wrong. It's a bit like if I try to hang a picture. If I don't have the skills to know how to check where the wires are behind the wall, how to make my drill work, how to get a roll plug, how to do the process of hanging a picture, there's a big danger I'm just going to be left with a hole in the wall and I won't have hung the picture up at all. And really that's what a lot of difficult conversations can feel like. So what do we do about that? Well, the first thing, nearly all difficult conversations, and it's been really interesting looking at this, most difficult conversations have at their heart some kind of a complaint, okay? I don't get enough time. I don't get enough help. Nobody appreciates what I do. Nobody cares what I do. Nobody's helping me with what I want to do. Nobody leaves me any peace to do what I'm trying to do. Have a think about yourself, about the kind of difficult conversations in your life, and ask yourself, are they nearly always a complaint? And the reality is they are. But not all. Sometimes a difficult conversation can be, I need to talk to you about my health, talk to you about my diagnosis, talk to you about your diagnosis, ask you to do something. You would think that those are not about complaints, but actually they often are too. I'm not happy with the way things are, so I would like you to do this. You don't seem to be understanding my diagnosis enough, so I'd like to talk to you about it. Sometimes there can be a complaint under there. And the reason why I say that is because often with the other person, again, we're talking before the conversation has happened, even when they see you approaching with this topic, they're already bracing themselves for the complaint that you're going to make, or the thing you're going to ask them to do that's just too hard for them to do. I want you to understand about my diagnosis. Well, it's going to be too difficult and I'll get it wrong and I don't really understand it and I don't really like your diagnosis and I haven't really accepted it anyway because it's inconvenient for me and I don't want it to be there. There could be so many things going on. I think it's like if you imagine a river flowing and there's all this depth underneath of all these conflicting thoughts and ideas. But there's that brace. There's the brace for the complaint. So what do we do about it? Well, here's some clear guidelines that you can use for yourself that are going to make it easier for the other person as well as for you. The first thing is, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, decide what it's going to be about and make it about that one thing only. It doesn't need to be about everything that's ever happened. Often when I'm advising people if they want to tell their partner that they want a divorce, they will come and say, right, okay, well, I've thought about the finances and thought about the kids and thought about this, that and the other. And I'm like, no, the very, very first conversation just needs to be, I want a divorce. I'd like you to hear me tell you that I'd like a divorce. That's it. That's the whole conversation. Just one conversation, just one statement made, delivered and heard. Because one of the reasons why we lose these conversations in the first 90 seconds is because we're often trying to do too much in the conversation. We're trying to get the whole thing out the way. What if I just wanted to say one thing to you? I've recently received a diagnosis. I'd like to be able to talk about it. Can we arrange a time? That can be the conversation. I would love to have a conversation about the state of the house when I get back from work. That could be the conversation. The conversation could be saying that you want to have a conversation about it. Imagine that. Because the reason why the conversation is lost before we're started is because we co-regulate ourselves with the people around us. Following separation and divorce, that co-regulation is much, much more fraught because we've been co-regulating with each other and now we're not anymore. Now people are having to do it by themselves and that's really hard. Causes a lot of tension. But the other thing that causes a lot of tension is because we don't like difficult conversations, we try and do the whole thing all in one go. And that can be really problematic. So if you are faced with a difficult conversation coming up, I want you to think, first of all, what is the complaint? Think about it for a while. Have you got a complaint? Are you making a complaint about that person? Complaint's different from criticising. Criticising is when you criticise somebody really for who they are and everything that they do. A complaint is, I don't like this particular thing. If you want to turn a complaint into something much more productive, turn it into what you want. I want to come home and the place to have been tidied up. You might not get what you want, but at least you can say it. But here's the thing. If you say, I'm really annoyed every time I come back, it's a pigsty, just pause for a minute. How's the other person going to hear that? I'd like to talk to you about when I come home. I'd love it if there can have been a spring clean, a little clean around, just a short clean so that everything's tidied up when I get in. You might not get it, but at least the other person will know what you want, rather than knowing that they're getting something wrong, but they don't know what it is that you want. And then keep to one thing. Really, that is the fundamental part of my Magic 3, clarify, communicate, and correct. The temptation, because we co-regulate with other people, because we have this emotional flow between ourselves and the people in our lives, because we've got this prediction and anticipation of what's going to happen, because we know in our heads what they're going to say and what they're going to do and how they're going to think and what they're going to feel, because we learned that from a very, very young age. It means that when we approach a difficult conversation, especially something that's very emotionally charged, we're already so far ahead in terms of what's going wrong and what's going to go wrong that we can be coming at it in a far more elevated way. If you need to ask your partner to leave the house for a couple of months because their behaviour has got outrageous, how you go about having that conversation is going to matter, being very clear. I am unhappy with some of the things that have been going on here recently, and I want you to go and stay at your mother's house for a couple of weeks whilst things die down and we get a chance to talk about what's going on. That's what I want. That's very, very different from building it through trying to create an argument of, you've done this and I can't accept that and I'm not going to accept this anymore, so you've got to leave. It's a very, very different type of conversation. Or perhaps you're being thrown out of the house and you're not happy with the circumstances on which it happened, and you can say, I understand I might need to leave the house for a few weeks. I want to be able to have conversations with you each day about what's going on with the kids. I want to be able to meet up and talk this through. So whatever has led us to this particular situation, we can work towards resolving it even while I'm away, staying in another space. There's a real difference when we approach a conversation this way, by understanding what we're complaining about, if we are making a complaint, and then asking ourselves what we want. Because in the end, we move towards what we want. We don't always move away from what we don't want. That's the reality. And part of the reason for that is because working out what the problem is and working out what we do about it requires us to spend so little time before we have that conversation clarifying what is going on, communicating it, and then correcting it when it goes wrong, if it moves into criticising and shaming and blaming. These conversations that I have during these episodes are just scratching the surface. Often when I'm doing these, I think I could talk for a long, long time, and I really could. I could probably go on all day, and I deliberately keep them short so they're just in bite-sized pieces. But I really would ask you, please do reach out into the comments. However you're watching this, maybe you're on YouTube, maybe you're in one of the podcast forums, but please do reach into the comments or just DM me directly. You can find me so easily. I'm on the website. You can chat. I've got Chatbot now. You can put it into the comments. You can find me on social media. But please do just let me know what comes up for you when I'm talking about these topics and where you would be interested in me deepening the conversation. I've got a lot more to say, but because we're still at the beginning of these episodes, I just want to open that conversational space and really invite you in, rather than just telling you a lot of stuff which might not be relevant for you. So whoever you are, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. Please share it. I really like reviews. It makes me so happy, especially as I'm just starting this podcast. You're going to notice some guest bonus interviews coming out as well shortly, where I'm getting people on to talk about difficult conversations from their points of view, which I hope will enrich your experience on Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that change everything. But so for today, we've been talking about co-regulation, and we've been talking about the emotionality that happens around difficult conversations, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.